Hi, you guys. Welcome back. My name is Carrie Penny. I am the Happy Crafty Homemaker, and today I'm going to be sharing with you guys a very quick tutorial on how to do my half-round eyelet shawl. This is a fairly simple tutorial. It's a very simple pattern, easy to customize based on the yarn and hook size that you want to use. I'm going to assume going into this you know how to chain, do a double crochet, and I'll show you how to make an eyelet as part of this tutorial, but once again that's just chaining and double crocheting. So this is a very easy shawl to make. Like I said, it's completely customizable. Today I'll be using Red Heart Super Saver Chunky in the color Flamingo. This is a bulky weight yarn. It's recommended hook size is a 6.5 millimeter, but for this tutorial, I will be using a 10 millimeter hook. This is the same hook that I used for the finished shawl that I shared a few days ago as of filming this, but in Show and Tell 113. I do prefer a slightly larger hook for this shawl, but it's not necessary to go quite this much of a jump from your recommended hook size or needle size to what you're actually going to use. Actually, I just realized maybe their recommended hook's different. Yeah, their recommended hook is actually an 8, sorry. The pattern calls for a 6. But going a little bit larger gives you a better drape on this shawl. It definitely isn't required if you want something just a little bit denser, because this is a double crochet. Now you can alter this to use a single crochet or a half double crochet. This isn't a one way to do it kind of project. As you're working on this, you may want to do a swatch just to see how dense your stitches are going to be with the hook you have chosen. That way you are guaranteed to get the drape and expected fabric you are looking to get. So I'm going to take a break, make sure I have everything together here, and I will be right back to start our tutorial. All right, you guys. So as I said in the introduction, this is a very basic recipe, more or less, on how to do this shawl. You can add an extra pie wedge to it if you wish. Mine are 8 wedges. However, you can add a 9th wedge. What it's going to do is bring in the V, so it's shaped more like, say, a Ruana shawl or poncho, instead of what I prefer, or what I've been making. It's not even what I prefer, what I have been making, which is almost straight across on the top edge. Once again, this tutorial will assume you know how to chain and double crochet already, but I will show you my hands as I am doing the stitches. So you can start off with a magic loop, or my preferred method, which is a chain 3, slip stitch to turn it into a loop, and there we have our hole. We're going to start with a chain 1 and do 8 double crochets into our circle. 1, 2, 3, and as I said, you can do an extra pie wedge. I would err on the side of smaller before trying to do anything more than 8 or 9 wedges for this. But the number of double crochets you put into this loop will dictate how many pie wedges you have in this shawl. So we have 4 stitches there. 5. 6. 6. I'm going over my tail just to have it tacked in and kind of keep it out of my way as I'm working. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we have our 8 stitches here. We're going to chain 1, turn our work, and work 2 double crochets into each stitch. And that gives us our first increase, just like we were making a standard circle. 2, 3, 4. Sorry if you can hear Curzon there in the background. He's not very happy. He wants to go outside. Pippin is actually being very good today, just laying here on the floor next to me. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and now we have 16 stitches. We've doubled the stitches that we started with. And you'll see where we're already creating that straight line across the top here and the semicircular pattern down here at the bottom. This is why I say you might want to start with the 8 or 9 wedges before you try to increase, because you will start to fill this in to where it's a complete circle. There is a point where instead of getting a V for your neck to go, where it will start to close up and it won't hang nicely on the back of your neck. So depending on the yarn you're using, the size hook you're using, that's going to be something you want to keep in mind, because once these stitches start to meet and you're not getting a great placement here where you can put your neck, you will start having it fall off your shoulders instead of draping around from here down to your shoulders or to the front of the body. But you can do more than 8 wedges with this. Part of it depends on the type of yarn you're using, how dense your stitches are, and part of it does also depend on how big you make your center circle. So if you continue to build out, you might want to loosen this circle, either, keeping your magic loop a little bit looser or adding an extra chain stitch in there. All right, so for row 3, we're going to chain 1, turn, we're going to double crochet into this first stitch, we are going to chain 1, skip this stitch. Actually, no, I messed up already. For row 3, forgot my rhythm here. We're going to do 2 double crochets into the first stitch. We're going to chain 1, skip 1, and 2 double crochets into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip 1, 2 double crochets into the next stitch. So at the end of this round, we will once again have 16 double crochets, but we will have created an extra stitch here with these eyelets. So that is where our increasing to 3 pattern will be. Chain 1, skip 1, 2 double crochets into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip 1, 2 double crochets into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip 1, 2 double crochets into that next stitch. And you'll already see where your pie wedges are going to begin. All right. So where we are right now, we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 double crochets. This is going to be our only weird spot right here. You can use this as your time to increase to 9 if you did not do that from the beginning. But that's going to be our only weird bumpy. That keeps us with 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 wedges beginning. From here, and every subsequent row will be just like this. You're going to chain 1, turn, 2 double crochets into your first stitch, then you're going to double crochet in every stitch of your pie wedge until you reach your chain 1 space. You're going to chain 1, skip the space, and double crochet twice into the first stitch of the next wedge. And this pattern continues until you're coming on to your last wedge. So chain 1, skip your space, 2 double crochets right here. We've only got 3, so we're gonna chain 1, skip your space, 2 double crochets into the first stitch, double crochet to the end of your pie wedge, chain 1, skip your space, 2 double crochets into the first stitch of the pie wedge, oops, double crochet to the end of the wedge, chain 1, skip the space, 2 double crochets into the first stitch of your next pie wedge, double crochet to the end of the wedge, chain 1, and each wedge is going to increase by 1 stitch every single row you do. 2 double crochets into your first stitch, double crochet to the end of the pie wedge. Now here's where you're going to do something different. When you come into this last wedge, you're going to double crochet until your last stitch, and then you're going to end on an increase. So you're going to do 2 into the last stitch of your final wedge. And what that does is very subtle. It's not a make or break thing if you don't do it this way, but you'll see we went from a very straight edge here, and when you pull this out, even where we have our little bumpy, it's not noticeable. But because we're keeping our increases on these two outside stitches. You're going to have this nice V show up. It's not going to be perfectly straight. It's going to kind of V right there very evenly. This is why this shawl drapes perfectly over the shoulder and down the front instead of kiltering back off the shoulders. Even if you do what looks like a perfect straight line here, when you go to wear this, because of where the increases are on the outside, it's going to make it fall forward on the body. So it's going to drape this way around your body because the increase is already tapered to come in. So it is a minor thing to put that last decrease in the last stitch of the final pie wedge, but it maintains the balance of the shawl across the shoulders. It's not going to fall off constantly if you don't do that, but it is going to give you a more optimum fit around the shoulders. So one more time, our repeat row over and over as we build this shawl out. Chain 1, turn. 2 double crochets into our first stitch. Oop. And like I said, you can do this in single crochets. You can do this in half doubles. You can do this in trebles if you want a super lacy one. It's up to you what stitch you use of the basic stitch sets. In this case, I'm just using a double because this is a very ploofy yarn, and I want that length and distance to keep the stitches light and to prevent the fabric from becoming too heavy and dense to wear. So 2 stitches into your first stitch, stitch a single stitch all the way across the pie wedge to your yarn over, or your eyelet hole. It's not a yarn over here. So we've got our hole. Chain 1, skip the hole. 2 double crochets into the first stitch. Then we're going to double crochet across the pie wedge until we get to our next eyelet. This also makes it pretty easy if you want to take this project in the car, because from now it's just increasing on the outer 2 sides and at the first stitch of every wedge that we're creating. So we've got our chain 1, 2 double crochets into the first stitch. Double crochet to the end of the pie wedge. Chain 1, skip our eyelet, 2 double crochets into the first stitch, 1 stitch in each stitch until you get to the end of the pie wedge. And notice we've gone from 3 to 4 stitches in each pie wedge now. So we got 2, 3, 4. So you're going to increase 1 stitch every pie wedge, every row. Chain 1, skip your eyelet, 2 double crochets. And as you work the distance down, you won't notice that you're only increasing on, or that you're increasing on alternating sides of the pie wedges, because as you wear this blocked out straight, that's going to read just as a triangular shape. It's not going to read like you're jumping side to side. Now, because the half double is not a complete stitch, it is a half stitch and doesn't build straight up and down like a single or a double crochet, you might get a little bit more alternating side visually until you block it. Now that will easily block out into a straight row if you block it. Chain 1, skip your eyelet, 2 double crochets into the first stitch of the pie wedge. Then you're going to double into the rest of the stitches across the pie wedge. Chain 1, skip your eyelet, 2 double crochets into the first stitch of your pie wedge. If you are taking this in the car with you and really don't ever want to have to think about it, one of the things you can do is put a stitch marker in your first eyelet and your last eyelet. And as you work across, move them up so you know when you get to it, okay, this is my last row or my last pie wedge. So I need to chain 1, double crochet into each stitch until the last stitch. And in that last stitch is where I'm going to put my increase. So I'm going to do 2 double crochets into the last stitch of the last pie wedge. And that maintains my increases being on the outer edge. And that's all there is to it. That is the 100% of the pattern. From here, you can make it as big as you want to, as small as you want to. You can use whatever hook and yarn you have available to make this work for what you want. But this is a super simple pattern. Now, on the last version of this that I shared in Show and Tell number 113, I did have just enough yarn to come across this top edge and do a slip stitch or single crochet border. So if you don't like being able to see your row transition here and you're not going to block it, which for certain yarns and hooks you really don't need to, you can true up that edge just a little bit by putting a slip stitch or single crochet border. And for double crochets, if you're doing single crochets, you're going to want to do 2 single crochets in every double crochet row. That way you don't create a puckering at the top line, and it will keep it very firm, but still have flexibility in the project. You can, from here, embellish it any way you want to. You can come back and do a picot border as you end it off. You could just do a row of picots across the bottom of the shawl. You could do, there is a braided stitch that is an edged crochet stitch that is very loose. That way you're not going to create any puckering on your outer edge. You can do whatever you want to on this outer edge to make it more decorative, add a little bit more weight to the bottom of it. If you're using a particularly lightweight yarn, that might not be a bad idea just to prevent flyaways. You can, like I said, true it up however you want to across the top. You'll treat it just like a straight line, even though we do have this ever so slight, gentle curve in that top line. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope you enjoy making it. If you do, share it. Let me see it. Let me know what you think. But this is 100% a super basic semi-round increase shawl. It's not much in doing there as far as difficulty. You can get an excellent result as a novice crocheter using this pattern. The only thing you'll need to remember is to keep your increases on the outer edge on every single row and alternate. It's going to be first until you hit the last pie wedge. And you'll increase in the first all the way around until you hit the last pie wedge on that row. And then you move the increase to the outer edge. And that does give us a much nicer shape for wear. Keeps it on our shoulders. But if you forget, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. It's not anything to stress yourself over. This is just how to get a slightly more finished feel on that edge. But I hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing what you guys make. It always brings me such joy to know that of the few tutorials I have put out, you guys are enjoying them as much as I've enjoyed making the original projects. So I look forward to seeing you guys real soon. As always, I love you all and hope you're having a spectacular weekend.